Have you ever gotten that chill down your spine? That cold, creeping feeling that something is terribly wrong, right inside your own family, even when everything on the surface looks perfect. A mother's intuition is a terrifying thing, and hers had been screaming in the back of her mind for weeks. She tried to brush it off, telling herself she was just being a suspicious old woman, until that fateful 2 a.m. when she witnessed her son-in-law in the act. But the truth was far worse than her intuition could have ever imagined. The real mastermind was her own, ever-smiling daughter. Now, she faces a brutal choice: continue to live in a sweet lie, or confront a truth that could destroy everything she holds dear. Subscribe to Deepu Kader Stories. Press like, and let us know what you would choose. The sound of a shattered clock. My name is Brenda Holloway. I am 65 years old, and at 2 o'clock this morning, I watched my son-in-law try to rob me. 2 a.m., the house was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that has a weight to it, pressing down on the floorboard, on the old furniture, on my own chest. I sat in the worn armchair in my study, the one my late husband, David, always used to sit in. The corduroy fabric was thin under my fingertips, worn smooth over the years. I wasn't looking at the family photos on the wall, not the one of Victoria in her graduation cap, nor the one of David and me on our wedding day. I wasn't listening to the familiar hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen downstairs. My eyes were fixed on the tablet in my lap. The screen cast a pale, ghostly light onto my face. On that screen, a grainy, black and white image showed the upstairs hallway. My hallway. And in that hallway, a shadow was moving. It was Seth, my son-in-law. My heart wasn't racing. It was beating. A slow, heavy drum against my ribs. Thump, thump, thump. Each beat was a tick of a clock that I knew was about to shatter into a million pieces. He was so careful. He moved like a cat, his bare feet finding the spots on the old oak floor that didn't creak. I knew those spots. David and I had learned them over 40 years of midnight trips to the kitchen for a glass of water. Seth had only been living in my house for 3 weeks, and yet, he knew them too. I watched his shadow reach my bedroom door. It paused. A dark, still shape against the pale wood I'd painted myself just last spring. Then, slowly, so slowly, the brass doorknob began to turn. My breath caught in my throat. Just for a second, a small, sharp thing, he slipped inside. Into my room. Into my space. The place I was supposed to feel safest. The motion sensor inside the second drawer of my mahogany dresser was tiny, smaller than a sugar cube, invisible in the dark. It was connected to every smart light in this house. It was connected to the speaker in the living room. It was connected to the camera hidden on my bookshelf, tucked right between a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird and my mother's old Bible. I watched his silhouette move towards the dresser, the place I kept my mother's old jewelry, wrapped in velvet. The place I kept a small bundle of emergency cash, tucked inside a floral print envelope. The place my own daughter, Victoria, knew about since she was a little girl with pigtails. His hand reached for the drawer. My finger hovered over the screen, over the red button that would do it all manually. But I didn't have to press it. The moment his hand touched the wood, the world exploded in light. Every lamp in my room, in the hallway, in the living room below, flashed on. A brilliant, sterile white that chased away every shadow. The silence was ripped apart by a sound, a piercing siren that screamed and echoed and screamed through the house. On the screen, Seth froze, a deer caught in the headlights. His face was a mask of pure, abject terror. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. He was just a boy, a frightened boy playing a dangerous man's game. But to understand how we got here, how my Seth, the young man who once promised to take care of my Victoria with such earnest eyes, ended up a thief in my bedroom. You have to go back 3 weeks, back to the stormy night when they first appeared on my doorstep, looking like 2 lost souls. The rain was coming down in sheets that night, the kind of heavy Georgia rain that feels like the sky is trying to wash the world clean. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters after dinner, listening to the sound of it drumming against the roof. It was a comforting sound, the sound of a safe, warm house sealed against the storm. Then the doorbell rang, sharp and sudden. I wasn't expecting anyone. My book club wasn't until Thursday. I dried my hands on my apron and walked to the front door, peering through the peephole. I saw them huddled together under the dim porch light, and my heart gave a little lurch. I opened the door, and there they were. Victoria and Seth, drenched, their faces pale and strained. Victoria was holding onto Seth's arm like he was the only thing keeping her upright. She tried to smile at me, but her lips just trembled. "Mom," she whispered. Her voice was thin, almost lost in the wind. I didn't ask questions. Not then. I just opened the door wider, the way a mother does. "Get in, both of you. You'll catch your death." They dripped water all over my welcome mat. Victoria fell into my arms, her small frame shivering. Seth stood behind her, his eyes fixed on the floor. He couldn't look at me. He just mumbled a quiet, "Hello, Brenda." Even then, I felt it. A small, cold knot in the pit of my stomach. A sense that the storm outside had followed them right into my home. Later, sitting in the living room with warm mugs of chamomile tea in their hands, the story came out. A story of bad investments. A sudden, unexpected job loss for Seth. Their apartment, their car, everything they had built together. Gone. Lost in a matter of weeks. "We just need a few weeks." "Mom," Victoria said, her eyes welling up with tears that looked so real. "Just until we can get back on our feet." I'm so sorry to ask. What mother could say no to that, to her only child, to the little girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose fevers I had soothed through the night? My late husband, David, always said, "Brenda, you see the pattern in things people miss." He meant it as a compliment to my accountant's mind, my ability to spot a discrepancy in a sea of numbers, a number that was out of place, a signature that didn't quite match. It was a skill that had served me well for 30 years. I never thought I'd have to use that skill to find a snake in my own home. But that night, all I saw were my children, my daughter, and the man she loved, frightened and in need of shelter from the storm. So I gave it to them. I gave them the guest room, with the fresh linen sheets that smelled of lavender. I gave them warm meals, my famous beef stew that Victoria always said tasted like home. I gave them my house. I gave them my trust. And that was my first and most terrible mistake. Part 2. The Weight of Whispers. The first few days felt almost normal. Having Victoria in the house again was like stepping back in time. I'd wake up to the smell of her shampoo, the sound of her humming in the shower. She'd come down to the kitchen, her hair wrapped in a towel, and pour herself a coffee just the way I taught her. A little cream, no sugar. She was so helpful. Too helpful. She insisted on doing the grocery shopping. She rearranged the pantry. She dusted shelves that hadn't been touched in years. "You shouldn't have to do all this yourself, Mom," she'd say, flashing that bright, perfect smile. "Let me take care of you for a change." It sounded sweet. It felt off. One afternoon, she found me in my bedroom, sorting through my jewelry box. It was my mother's box, made of dark cherry wood, lined with faded red velvet. Victoria came and sat on the edge of my bed. She picked up a string of pearls, letting them slide through her fingers. "I remember these," she said, her voice soft with nostalgia. "Grandma wore these to my christening." I smiled. She did. She loved you so much. Then she looked at me, her head tilted just so. An innocent, curious look. "You keep everything important in here, don't you?" "Mom, you always did." A little bit of emergency cash, tucked away in the bottom, just in case. The air in the room seemed to get a little thicker. "It's not safe, you know," she continued, her tone shifting to one of gentle concern. "With everything you hear on the news these days, maybe you should think about getting a small safe, or putting things in a bank box." I just nodded. Maybe I should. But I watched her. I watched how her eyes lingered on the box after she put the pearls down. I saw the briefest flicker of something behind her loving gaze. something I couldn't name, and then there was Seth. If Victoria was a whirlwind of helpful energy, Seth was a ghost. He drifted through the rooms of my house like he was afraid of leaving footprints. He spent most of his time in the guest room, the door always closed. He said he was online. Searching for jobs, he ate what I cooked, but I could tell he wasn't tasting it. His eyes were always somewhere else. Far away. He jumped at the slightest sound. The ring of the telephone, the clatter of a dropped spoon. One evening, I was handing him a plate for dinner, and I noticed his hands. His knuckles, there were small, angry-looking scrapes across them, like he'd punched a wall. Or something harder. Seth. Honey. What happened to your hand? I asked. My voice, gentle. He flinched. He pulled his hand back as if my gaze had burned him. Oh. It's nothing, he mumbled, quickly shoving his hands into his pockets. Just slammed it in a car door. Clumsy. He forced a weak smile. It didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were full of shadows. I didn't press him, but I remembered. An accountant always remembers the details that don't add up. The numbers in the wrong column. The stories that feel a little too rehearsed. The whispers started on the third night. I'm an early riser. Always have been. I was downstairs in the kitchen. To the sky outside, still a dark, sleepy blue. I had the coffee maker on, waiting for that first gurgle. The house was quiet. Then I heard it. A low murmur from the back porch. The door was cracked open, just enough for a sliver of cold air to sneak in. I walked closer, my slippers silent on the linoleum floor. It was Seth's voice. It was tight, strained. A whisper laced with panic. I stood by the door, hidden in the shadows of the kitchen. I know I shouldn't have listened, but I couldn't walk away. I don't have it, he was saying. His voice was so low I had to strain to hear. Listen to me. I don't have it yet. There was a pause. He was listening to someone on the other end of the line. I know, he hissed. You don't have to tell me. Just give me more time. A little more time. His voice cracked on the last word. Another pause. Longer this time. No, he said, his voice dropping even lower, almost to nothing. No, she doesn't know anything. She thinks she doesn't suspect a thing. I promise. My blood ran cold. He was talking about me. I backed away from the door, my heart a cold stone in my chest. I moved back to the counter, my hands trembling slightly as I poured myself a coffee. When Seth came back inside a few moments later, his face was pale. He saw me standing there and he froze. Morning? Seth, I said, my voice steady, deceptively calm. Everything all right? He swallowed hard. Yeah, he said, trying to sound casual. Yeah, just a wrong number. He walked past me and went straight up the stairs. I stood there in my quiet kitchen, the warm mug doing nothing to chase away the chill that had settled deep in my bones. A wrong number, David's voice echoed in my mind. You see the pattern in things, Brenda, and I was seeing the pieces, the practice story, the faked concern, the scraped knuckles, the whispered, terrified promises on the phone. It was all starting to form a picture, a dark, ugly picture, and I was standing right in the middle of it. Part 3, The Digital Ghost. The days after that first whisper felt different. The air in my house grew thick with things unsaid. It settled in the corners like dust. I could feel it when I walked down the hall, a stillness that wasn't peaceful. It was watchful. An accountant doesn't just let a discrepancy go. It's not in our nature. It's a loose thread, and you have to pull it, just to see what unravels. So, one Tuesday afternoon, when Victoria took Seth out to run errands they never seemed to come back from with anything but coffee, I decided to pull the thread. I sat down at my desk in the study. The Wi-Fi router blinked its little green light on the shelf, steady and unassuming. It was David who had insisted we get a good one. The gateway to the world. Brenda, he'd said with a grin. I never thought I'd use it like a detective. Logging into the router's administrative page wasn't hard. The password was still David's old Army serial number. I never had the heart to change it. A few clicks. and I was looking at a list of all the devices connected to my network. Victoria's laptop, my tablet, their 2 cell phones, and a long, detailed history of the websites they had visited. My heart started that slow, heavy beat again. Thump, thump. I scrolled through Victoria's history first. Shopping sites, lifestyle blogs, nothing out of the ordinary. But then I clicked on Seth's phone. My breath hitched. It wasn't LinkedIn. It wasn't Indeed or Monster.com. It was a list that made my blood run cold. Names I didn't recognize, but I knew what they were. BetMGM, DraftKings, FanDuel, page after page of online sportsbooks and poker sites. Visited at all hours. 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning. Times when I thought he was asleep in the room down the hall. There was no job crisis. There was a gambling crisis. The whispers on the phone, the scratches on his knuckles, the way he couldn't look me in the eye, it all clicked into place. Not with a satisfying snap, but with the sickening crunch of breaking glass. He was in debt. Deep debt. The kind of debt that makes a man desperate. I closed the laptop, my hand trembling slightly. I felt a wave of pity for him, and for my daughter, tangled up in this mess. I thought, this is it. This is the secret. I thought I had found the bottom of it all. I was wrong. The bottom was much deeper. That evening, I was in my garden out back, trimming the dead leaves off my geraniums. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and purple. The kitchen window was open just a crack, letting out the warm air, and their voices, they were arguing. Not loud, but with a sharp, tense energy that cut through the quiet evening air. I froze, my pruning shears hovering over a wilting bloom. I shouldn't have listened. I know I shouldn't have. But I couldn't move. Seth's voice was low, pleading, desperate. I can't do this to her. Vicky, it's not right. She's your mother. And then, Victoria's reply. Her voice wasn't the sweet, gentle voice of my daughter. It was cold. It was hard. Like stones hitting ice. You will, she said. Each word was a sharp little chip. You will. Or they will find us. We don't have a choice. Seth, we're in this together. The word hung in the air. A threat. We're in this together. My pruning shears fell from my hand. They clattered onto the stone patio. I didn't even notice. It wasn't just his mess. It was their mess. And Victoria, my Victoria, she wasn't a victim caught in the crossfire. She was standing right beside him, holding the gun. I stumbled back from the window, my hand flying to my mouth. The world tilted. The beautiful sunset, the warm air, my carefully tended flowers, it all disappeared. All I could hear was her voice, cold and hard. A stranger's voice coming out of my daughter's mouth. The lie wasn't that Seth had lost his job. The lie was everything. Their sad story on my doorstep. The tears, the hugs, all of it. A performance. A long, carefully crafted play designed to get them inside my home, inside my life, inside my trust. I sank down onto the garden bench, the rough wood pressing into my back. The cold knot in my stomach from that first night had grown into a block of ice. It was sitting right in my chest, making it hard to breathe. My baby girl, my sweet Victoria. She wasn't just helping her husband hide a secret. She was part of it. No, she wasn't just part of it. She was driving it. That coldness in her voice. That was the sound of the person in charge. Have you ever discovered a truth so terrible it felt like the world stopped turning? A truth that changed everything you thought you knew about someone you loved? Tell me in the comments. I need to know I'm not alone in this feeling. Part 4, A Spider's Web. I didn't cry. Not then. The tears would come later. For now, the grief was a block of ice in my chest. Cold. Hard. And inside that cold, my mind was perfectly clear. An accountant's mind, a mind that knew what to do when the numbers didn't add up. You find the error. You isolate it. And you correct the ledger. I didn't call the police. This wasn't their fight. Not yet. This was about my house. My family, my daughter, I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed them to see it. I needed them to see themselves, so I started to build my web. My house is old, but I am not. David's pension had been generous. After he passed, I'd had a new security system installed. Smart lights. Smart speakers. Cameras. Just simple things. Really. Things to give an old woman living alone a little peace of mind. I never imagined I would use them like this. That afternoon, while Victoria was out running errands and Seth was locked in the guest room, I went to work. I went to my bedroom. I opened the second drawer of my dresser. The Target. I took everything out. My mother's pearls. The small stack of bills. The silver locket David gave me on our 10th anniversary. I put them all in an old shoebox and hid it in the back of my closet, under a pile of winter sweaters. The drawer was now empty. From my study, I retrieved the small motion sensor. It was no bigger than my thumb. I peeled the adhesive backing and pressed it firmly to the inside wall of the drawer, deep in the back corner. Then, I sat down at my desk and opened the app on my phone. The interface was simple. I created a new routine, a new sequence of events. Trigger motion, detected by dresser sensor. Action 1, all lights in Brenda's room. Hallway and living room turn on. Brightness 100%, color cool white. Action 2, play audio on living room speaker. Sound security siren. Volume maximum. Action 3, start recording on bedroom camera. I checked the camera's angle. It was positioned on top of my bookshelf, mostly hidden behind an old photo album. The view was perfect. It saw the door. It saw the bed. And it saw the dresser. The web was set. All it needed was the fly. Before I could allow myself to have any second thoughts, I did one last thing. I went back to the security app's cloud storage. I scrolled back through the recordings from the living room camera from 2 nights before. The night after the fight I had overheard, I found it. There they were. Sitting on my sofa. Victoria's voice was low, but the camera's microphone was sensitive. It picked up every word. The tea, she was saying. Her tone was cold, clinical. I'll make her a cup of chamomile tea. She loves it before bed. I'll put the pill in then. She'll be asleep in 20 minutes. Deep asleep. Seth was just a shape beside her, his head in his hands. He didn't speak. He just nodded. You go in it too. Victoria continued. The second drawer. Just like I told you. Get the box. Get the cash. And get out. I'll be waiting downstairs. We'll be gone before she even stirs. I closed the app. My hand was steady. The block of ice in my chest seemed to spread through my whole body. This was no longer just about debt. This was about my daughter. My Victoria. Planning to drug her own mother. That evening, when Victoria came into the living room holding a steaming mug, I was ready. I made you some tea. Mom, she said, her voice dripping with counterfeit sweetness. Chamomile. To help you relax. I looked at her. I looked at the daughter I had raised. The girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged. The teenager whose heartbreaks I had mended. I looked at her, and I saw a stranger. I smiled. A small, tired smile. Thank you, sweetheart, I said, taking the mug. That's so thoughtful of you. I brought the mug to my lips. The steam warmed my face. I pretended to take a sip. When she turned her back to tidy the magazines on the coffee table, I poured a little of the tea into the pot of my wilting geranium. Maybe it would help it sleep too. I drank the tea my Victoria made for me, with so much love. I even told her it was delicious. An hour later, I yawned. A big, theatrical yawn. I pressed a hand to my mouth. My goodness, I said, letting my voice sound a little groggy. That tea has really hit me. I think I'm going to turn in early. Victoria's eyes lit up. Just for a second. A glint of triumph. Of course. Mom, she said, rushing to help me up. You get a good night's rest. You deserve it. She helped me up the stairs. Her hand on my arm felt like a brand. At the door to my room, she kissed my cheek. Her lips were cold. Sleep well, she whispered. I closed the door. I locked it. And then I went into my study and sat down in the dark to wait for 2 o'clock. Woo. Part 5, 2 o'clock on a Thursday, and so we return to 2 o'clock in the morning. To the suffocating silence right before the storm, I was in my study, waiting. My teacup from earlier sat cold on the desk beside me, a silent witness. On the tablet in my lap, the grainy image of my hallway flickered. I watched Seth's shadow appear at the top of the stairs. He moved with that practiced stillness, a ghost in his own life. Downstairs, I knew Victoria was awake. I had seen the faint blue glow of her phone screen from under her door an hour ago. She was waiting, too. A director in the wings, waiting for the final act. He reached my door. He turned the knob. He slipped inside. My heart was no longer a slow drum. It was a fist, clenched tight in my chest. I saw his shape move through the darkness of my room. He didn't even glance at the bed where he thought I was sleeping, drugged and helpless. He went straight for the mahogany dresser, straight for the prize. His hand, a pale shape in the gloom, reached for the second drawer. The moment his fingertips brushed against the polished wood, the trap sprang. It wasn't a loud noise that started it. It was light. A sudden, violent flood of it. Every lamp in the room, in the hallway, downstairs in the living room, flashed on at once. 100 watts of sterile, unforgiving white light that burned away every shadow. Seth cried out. A short, sharp gasp of pure shock. He threw his hands up to shield his eyes, stumbling backward, blinded. And then came the sound. It wasn't the gentle chime of my old grandfather clock. It was a siren, a shrill, piercing wail that I had downloaded myself. It screamed from the smart speaker in the living room, bouncing off the walls, filling every inch of my quiet house with its ugly, frantic noise. I heard a door fly open downstairs. Victoria's door. I heard her panicked footsteps on the hardwood floor. On my tablet, I watched Seth. He was frozen in the middle of my bedroom floor, caught in the glare. His face was slick with sweat. His eyes were wide with a terror so complete it was almost childlike. He looked lost, broken. Downstairs, the living room television flickered to life on its own. The siren cut off as suddenly as it had started, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. That was my cue. I pushed myself out of the armchair. My knees ached a little, but my back was straight. I walked out of the study and stood at the top of the stairs. Below me, Victoria was looking up, her face a mess of confusion and feigned horror. Seth came stumbling out of my room, his hands shaking. Brenda. Mom, there was a noise. I thought someone broke in, he stammered. His voice cracking, Victoria rushed to the bottom of the stairs, playing her part beautifully. Mom, oh my God. Are you okay? What happened? Was it a burglar? She looked from me to Seth, her eyes wide, trying to piece her broken story back together. I started down the stairs. Slowly, one step at a time. The old wood creaked under my feet. A familiar sound. A sound of home. They both watched me, their faces turned up, waiting. I didn't look at Seth. My eyes were locked on my daughter, on her perfect, lovely face, on the lies swimming in her eyes. I reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped just a few feet from her. I looked at her, and then at the television screen, which was still showing the live feed of my empty, brightly lit bedroom. The show's over. Victoria, I said. My voice was quiet. It was calm, but it cut through the silence like a razor. Her face faltered. For just a second, the mask slipped. What are you talking about? Mom, Seth was just trying to protect you. She reached for my arm, her actress tears starting to well up. I didn't move. I just raised my phone, which was already in my hand. I pressed a button. The image on the television screen changed. It was no longer a live feed. It was a video. A video from 2 nights ago, recorded by the same camera. It showed my bedroom, dimly lit. And it showed Victoria. My Victoria, standing by the dresser, pointing. The audio was crystal clear. The second drawer, Seth. Her voice on the video said, cold and precise. That's where she keeps it. The jewelry. The cash. You wait until 2 a.m. I'll make her my special chamomile tea. She'll be dead to the world. The color drained from Victoria's face. She stared at the screen, at herself, at her own betrayal, played back in perfect detail. She looked like she had seen a ghost. The digital ghost of the person she really was. Seth stared, his mouth hanging open. He looked from the screen to his wife, the last bit of denial crumbling from his face. He finally understood. He wasn't her partner. He was her pawn. Victoria took a step back, shaking her head. The tears were gone now. Her eyes were hard. Her perfect mask shattered on the floor, leaving something ugly and twisted in its place. She didn't look at me. She looked at Seth. A look of pure, venomous rage. "You useless fool," she hissed, her voice low and shaking with fury. "You ruined everything." Part 6. The Unraveling. The siren cut off. Victoria's words. "You useless fool, you ruined everything," hung in the air. They seemed to echo in the sudden, deafening silence. The three of us stood there, frozen, like figures in a terrible museum exhibit. The husband on his knees, the mother on the stairs, and the daughter, her face twisted into a mask of pure fury. The pretty mask of my loving Victoria had shattered, and the woman underneath was someone I did not know. She was the first to move. She didn't look at me. She turned on Seth. Her voice wasn't a shout. It was a low, venomous hiss. "I told you what to do," she spat. "One simple thing. And you couldn't even do that right." Seth just stared up at her. His face was slick with sweat. He looked broken. A toy a child had played with too roughly and then discarded. "Vicky," he whispered. The lights. "Don't Vicky me," she snapped. Her eyes were hard, like chips of glass. Then, she turned her gaze on me, and there was no shame, no remorse, only rage. "You," she said. The word was an accusation. "You did this. You were always watching, always judging." I didn't say a word. I just stood on the stairs, my hand resting on the smooth, cool wood of the banister. I felt nothing. Just a strange, hollow calm. "This is your fault," she cried, her voice finally rising. She took a step towards the stairs. "All of it. You have all this. This big house. Your savings. Everything just sitting here while we have nothing. If you had just helped us when we needed it, none of this would have happened." So there it was. The truth. The ugly, grasping truth that had been hiding behind all the sweet smiles and chamomile tea. It wasn't about need. It was about want. About envy. She saw my life. The life David and I had worked 40 years to build. Not as a home, but as a resource she was entitled to. Before I could answer, a sound came from the floor. A ragged, desperate sob. It was Seth. He was no longer on his knees. He was crumpled on the floor, his head in his hands, his whole body shaking. "It was the money. Brenda," he choked out, his voice muffled by his hands. "I swear. I lost so much. More than I told her. The people I owe, they're not good people." He looked up, his eyes wild with fear. "They were threatening me. They sent me a picture. A picture of our front door, Vicky's car. They said they knew where we were. They knew about you." Victoria scoffed. A short, ugly sound. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. Seth, they weren't going to do anything." But Seth shook his head frantically. "You don't know them. You told me it was just a few thousand. You told me they were just collectors. You didn't tell me they'd..." His voice broke. "That they'd hurt people." He turned his desperate eyes to me. "I didn't want to do this. I told her I didn't want to. But she said it was the only way. She said you'd never miss it. She said you wouldn't get hurt." He was telling the truth. I could see it. I could see the terrified, weak man who had let himself be led into a nightmare by his wife, by my daughter. It didn't excuse what he had done. Not at all. But it changed the shape of it. He was a fool. A coward. But she... She was the architect. I looked from his crumpled form on the floor to her rigid, defiant stance. And in that moment, the block of ice in my chest finally cracked. But what flooded out wasn't grief. It was a cold, hard finality. I walked down the rest of the stairs. My feet made no sound on the rug. I walked past them, into the hallway, and opened the closet door. I pulled out a large, empty duffel bag, one we used for family vacations. A long time ago. I walked back into the living room and threw it on the floor between them. It landed with a soft, dull thud. They both stared at it. My voice, when I finally spoke, was quiet. It was steady. It was the calmest voice in the room. "Pack what you can carry," I said. Victoria stared at me, her mouth falling open in disbelief. "What?" "You heard me," I said, my eyes meeting hers. I did not blink. "Get your things. Both of you." "You can't be serious," she sneered. "You're kicking out your own daughter." "The person who tried to drug and rob me is not my daughter," I replied. My voice did not waver. "My daughter wouldn't do that. I don't know who you are." A flicker of something crossed her face. For a heartbeat, I thought it might be pain, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by that same hard defiance. "Fine," she said, her voice dripping with scorn. "Fine. But you'll regret this." She turned and stalked towards the guest room. Seth didn't move. He just knelt on the floor, looking at the empty bag, as if it were the heaviest thing in the world. "Brenda, I'm so sorry," he whispered. "Get up." "Seth," I said. My voice was not unkind, just tired. So incredibly tired. "Go pack your bag." He flinched as if I had struck him. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself to his feet and followed the sound of his wife slamming drawers upstairs. I stood alone in my brightly lit living room, the silence returning, heavier than before. The adrenaline was gone. The cold resolve was gone. All that was left was the echo, and a hollow exhaustion that felt like it went right down to my bones. Part 7. Echoes in a Quiet House. After the front door clicked shut, a new kind of silence fell over the house. It wasn't the watchful silence of the hours before. It wasn't the ringing silence after the siren. This was a hollow silence. An empty silence. The kind that rushes in to fill a space where something used to be. The adrenaline that had held me up like a steel frame for hours, it just dissolved. My legs felt weak. My bones heavy. I didn't turn off the lights. I just stood there, in the middle of the living room, listening to the echoes of things that were no longer there. The echo of Victoria's furious hiss. The echo of Seth's broken sob. The echo of the front door closing on my daughter's back. Slowly, I began to walk through my house. My feet felt like lead. I went into the kitchen. The 2 mugs from their tea last night were still sitting by the sink. One had a faint lipstick stain on the rim. Victoria's shade of pink. I stared at it. Just a mug. But it felt like a relic from another lifetime. A lifetime that had ended only an hour ago. On the refrigerator, held up by a little sunflower magnet, was a picture of her. Victoria. She was maybe 7 years old in the photo, with a gap-toothed grin, missing her 2 front teeth. She was holding up a dandelion, her eyes sparkling with that pure, uncomplicated joy of a child. I had taken that picture myself, in our backyard, on a sunny afternoon that felt a million miles away. Who was that little girl? Where did she go? I traced the outline of her smiling face with my finger. The cold surface of the refrigerator door doing nothing to numb the ache in my chest. Was the woman who walked out my door tonight? Was she always hiding inside that little girl, a seed of something cold and hard? Just waiting for the right time to grow. I moved from the kitchen to the living room. I saw the indentation on the sofa cushion where Seth used to sit for hours, staring at his phone. I saw the fashion magazine Victoria had left on the coffee table, flipped open to a page of expensive handbags. They were ghosts now. Their presence was everywhere and nowhere at all. My hand trailed along the banister as I went upstairs. I could almost hear the sound of Victoria's laughter, the way it used to bounce off these walls when she was a teenager, running up to her room after school. It was a sound I had missed so much after she'd grown up and moved out. And for 3 short weeks, it had been back. A pale imitation of it, maybe. But it had been here. Now, the silence that replaced it was deafening. I passed their room, the guest room. The door was ajar. The bed was unmade. The sheets tangled in a heap. A single sock lay on the floor. It was all so ordinary, so mundane. You'd never know that a life had just been torn apart in this house. I didn't go in. I couldn't. I walked to the end of the hall. To my own room. The bright lights were still on. The second drawer of my dresser was still slightly open. I walked over and pushed it shut. The wood slid smoothly into place, making a soft, final sound. Click. It's a strange thing. Grief. It's not always for the dead. Sometimes you grieve for the living. You grieve for the person you thought you knew, the person you loved. You grieve for the memories that are now tainted, forever changed by the truth that came after them. I sat down on the edge of my bed. The strength that had carried me through the confrontation, that cold, hard resolve, it was gone. And in its place was just a bone-deep weariness, an emptiness that felt vast and endless. I thought about David. What would he have said? He always knew what to do. He would have held my hand, his warm, steady presence a shield against the world. But David was gone, and I was alone in this big, quiet house with the ghosts of my own making. Was it my fault? The question crept into my mind. A cold, insidious whisper. Did I give her too much? Not enough? Did I miss some sign? Some cry for help buried beneath the smiles and the I love you. Mom, you spend your whole life trying to build a good person, trying to pour all the love and wisdom you have into this one little soul. And then you watch them choose a path so far from everything you taught them. And you can't help but ask, where did I go wrong? Where did I fail? I wrapped my arms around myself, a poor substitute for the comfort I craved. The tears I had held back for so long finally came. They weren't hot, angry tears. They were cold and quiet. They slid down my cheeks and dripped onto my hands, one by one. I wasn't crying for the money they tried to steal. I wasn't crying out of fear. I was crying for that little girl with the gap-toothed smile. I was crying for my daughter, the one I had just lost. If you are still listening to my story, if you have journeyed with me to this quiet, broken place, please, would you do me a kindness? Just leave a comment for me below. A simple way. We hear you. Brenda. Your presence, even from far away. It's the greatest encouragement I could ask for to help me tell you the end of this long, dark night. Part 8. Erasing the Ghosts. For 3 days, I did nothing. The house stayed silent. I moved through it like a ghost in my own life. I made toast I didn't eat. I brewed coffee that went cold. The geranium on the windowsill, the one I'd poured the drugged tea into, had started to wilt. I didn't have the heart to water it. It felt right, somehow, that we were withering together. On the 4th day, I woke up and the sun was streaming through my window, and I felt a flicker of something. Not happiness, not hope, just resolve. I could not let them haunt my home. I could not let their presence linger in the air like dust motes in the morning light. It was time to clean house. I went to the garage and found what I needed. Cardboard boxes, flattened and smelling of dust. A roll of packing tape. A black marker. I started in the guest room. Their room, the bed was unmade. The sheets twisted into a nest of anger and defeat. A faint scent of Victoria's perfume still hung in the air. I pulled the window open wide, letting the crisp morning air rush in, chasing the scent away. Methodically, I began. An accountant's work. A ledger of a life that was no longer welcome here. I stripped the bed, the sheets, the pillowcases, the comforter. I bundled them all up and shoved them into a trash bag. I would not wash them. I would not have their last night's sleep touching my things. I opened the closet. Victoria's clothes were still hanging there. Bright blouses, tailored dresses, the clothes of a woman playing a part. I took them off the hangers, one by one. I didn't look at them. I just folded them. Neat, impersonal squares. I placed them in a box. On Seth's side, there were just a few shirts, a pair of worn jeans, a cheap suit, and a plastic bag. His things felt sad. They felt temporary. Like he had known all along he wouldn't be staying long. His things went into another box. I worked my way through the room. The half-empty bottle of lotion on the nightstand. The paperback novel with the corner turned down. The charging cable snaking from the wall. Each item I picked up was a small act of erasure. I was packing away the evidence. I was taking back my home. My hands worked, but my mind was quiet. It was a mercy. The methodical rhythm of the task kept the memories at bay. Fold. Place. Tape. Label. I moved to the small desk in the corner. It was cluttered with their mail. Bills. Mostly. I gathered them up without looking and put them aside. Then I saw it, tucked in the back of the drawer, a small, folded piece of construction paper. Red. Faded to a dusty pink at the creases. My fingers hesitated. I knew what it was before I even touched it. I picked it up. It was light as a feather. I unfolded it carefully. The paper was brittle with age. On the front, there was a childish drawing of two stick figures. One tall, one small, both smiling. The sun was a yellow crayon scribble in the corner. Inside, the writing was big and wobbly. The kind of writing a child does when they're gripping the pencil with their whole fist. It was done in green crayon. To the best mommy in the world. And underneath, a single, lopsided heart, signed, Vicky. Age 6. And just like that, the ice in my chest, the cold, hard wall I had built around my heart. It didn't just crack. It shattered. A sob tore its way out of my throat. It was a raw, ugly sound. The sound of something breaking. I sank down to the floor, my legs giving way beneath me. I pulled the little card to my chest, clutching it like a lifeline, and I wept. I wept for the little girl with the green crayon, for the sticky fingers and the gap-toothed smile, for the unconditional love that had lived in that lopsided heart. I wept for the woman she had become, that hard-eyed stranger who had stood in my living room and looked at me with such hate. I wept for the loss of them both. The little girl who was gone forever, and the woman who was a ghost. I don't know how long I sat there on the floor of that empty room, surrounded by boxes filled with a life that was no longer mine. The sun moved across the sky, its light shifting through the window, across the bare wooden floors. Eventually, the tears stopped. All that was left was a deep, hutching quiet. Slowly, I got to my feet. My knees creaked. I felt every one of my 65 years. I looked at the red card in my hand. For a moment, I thought about tearing it up, about throwing it in the trash with the bedsheets, about erasing that memory too, but I couldn't. It was the only piece of her I had left. The real her. I walked out of the guest room, leaving the sealed boxes behind. I went to my study. From the back of my closet, I pulled out a small, wooden box. It was where I kept my own important papers. My birth certificate, David's death certificate, my will. I opened the box. I placed the little red card inside, right on top. Then I closed the lid. I put the box back in the closet, in the dark. It was not a memory to be displayed. It was a truth to be kept, a quiet, painful reminder of a daughter I once had, a daughter I had lost. Not to death, but to something far, far worse. Part 9. The First Shoots of Green. Time doesn't heal all wounds. I know that now. But it does soften the edges. It takes the sharp, jagged pieces of a memory and tumbles them smooth, like stones in a river. Weeks passed. The silence in the house became less of a hollow ache and more of a quiet hum. My quiet hum. I started to reclaim the small rhythms of my life. The morning coffee on the porch. The sound of the mail truck at noon. The scent of lavender soap when I washed the sheets. These simple things became anchors, holding me steady in the slow-moving current of my days. One Tuesday afternoon, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press the green button. "Hello," I said. My voice, cautious. There was a pause on the other end. just the faint sound of static. Then, a voice. Hesitant. Quiet. Brenda. It's Seth. My hand tightened on the receiver. I didn't say anything. I just stood there in my kitchen, the afternoon sun slanting across the floor, and I listened. I know you have no reason to talk to me, he started, his words tumbling out in a rush. And I'm not calling to ask for anything. Not forgiveness. Not another chance. I had to call. I had to say it. He took a shaky breath. I am so sorry, he said. And the words didn't feel cheap. They didn't feel like an excuse. They felt heavy. Worn. What I did, what I was a part of, it was wrong. There's no excuse for it. I was weak. I was a coward. I let my problems, and I let Victoria lead me down a path I never should have walked. I just wanted you to hear that from me. That's all. I still didn't speak. I heard another sound in the background. A distant bell. I'm in a program, he added, his voice a little stronger now. For the gambling, I'm trying to fix what's broken in me. It's hard, but I'm trying. I finally found my voice. It was just a whisper. And Victoria, another pause. This one was longer. Sadder, I don't know, he said. And the honesty in those 3 words told me everything. She left the day after. After that night, I haven't heard from her since. He sighed, a sound filled with a weariness that went beyond his years. Anyway, I won't bother you again. Goodbye. Brenda. And then he hung up. I stood there for a long time, holding the phone, listening to the dial tone. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I just felt a quiet sense of an ending, a chapter closing. He was trying to fix what was broken. I hoped, for his sake, that he could. That Thursday was my book club meeting. For the first time in a month, I decided to go. My friends, Martha and Jean, didn't pry. They didn't ask where I'd been. They just welcomed me back with warm hugs and a slice of Jean's famous lemon pound cake. We sat in Martha's sun-drenched living room, talking about the book we'd read. It was a story about a woman rebuilding her life after a great loss. It felt a little too on the nose, but it was good to talk about words on a page instead of the unspoken words in my own house. I thought the main character was incredibly resilient, Martha said, peering over her reading glasses. I agreed, surprising myself. But I think her real strength wasn't in bouncing back. It was in learning how to live with the cracks. My friends looked at me, a soft understanding in their eyes. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of my old self. I felt normal. Just a group of women, drinking coffee, talking about books. It was a simple, beautiful thing. The next morning, I went out to my garden. The geraniums on the patio were looking a little sad. I had neglected them. Their leaves were tinged with yellow. Their blooms faded. I felt a pang of guilt. It wasn't their fault my world had turned upside down. I spent the whole morning out there, under the warm Georgia sun. I pulled the weeds that had crept into the flower beds. I turned the soil, feeling the rich, dark earth crumble in my hands. It felt good. It felt real. I noticed a small patch of green near the old oak tree. New shoots, pushing their way up through the hard, dry ground. Life, insisting on itself. Stubborn and determined, I got a watering can and gave them a long, gentle drink. As I watched the water soak into the soil, I felt something shift inside me. A loosening, a small, hopeful unfurling, just like those tiny green leaves. I wasn't the same woman I was a month ago. The cracks were there. They would always be there. Scars on the landscape of my heart. But maybe, just maybe, something new could grow around them. Something stronger. I wasn't rebuilding the life I had. I was starting to plant a new one. Right here, in the quiet solitude of my own backyard. It wasn't much. It was just a few hours of weeding and watering, but it felt like a beginning. The house on Holloway Street. It's been 6 months. Summer has settled over Atlanta, heavy and sweet like warm honey. I'm sitting on my front porch, in the old wooden rocking chair that David and I bought at a flea market our first year of marriage. The wood is smooth and worn under my hand, polished by decades of quiet evenings. It knows my shape. It holds my history. There's a tall glass of iced tea sweating on the small table beside me. I crushed a sprig of mint from my garden into it this morning, and the scent rises up to meet me with every gentle rock of the chair. The ice cubes clink softly as they melt, a tiny, peaceful bell tolling the slow passage of a July afternoon. Across the street, my neighbor, Mr. Henderson, is watering his prize-winning roses. The fine mist catches the sunlight, creating a fleeting rainbow just above the blossom. The air smells of damp earth, cut grass, and flowers. My own geraniums are blooming on the windowsill inside. Big, confident globes of bright red. I've been watering them every morning. We seem to have a new understanding, those flowers and I. We both survived a long, difficult winter. The house behind me is quiet, but it's a different kind of quiet now. For weeks after they left, the silence was a presence. It had a weight, a shape. It was filled with the ghosts of words that were never said, and the echoes of words that I wished I'd never heard. Now, it's just peace. The quiet is a soft blanket, not a heavy shroud. The boxes of their things are gone. I remember the day the charity truck came. 2 young men, polite and efficient. It carried them out. I watched them load a box containing Victoria's expensive dresses, another with Seth's worn-out business books. I didn't feel the sting I expected. I just felt a clearing, a space being made. When the truck drove away, taking the last physical traces of their time here, I felt the air in the house get a little lighter. I went inside and opened all the windows. The new locks on the doors are solid brass. I had a locksmith come and change every one. The first time I turned the new key in the deadbolt, the sound was different. A solid, satisfying thunk. It wasn't the sound of locking something out. It was the sound of sealing something in. Safety, solitude, sanctuary. I don't think about them every day anymore. But sometimes, a memory will catch me off guard. Just yesterday, I was peeling an orange in the kitchen, and the sharp, citrus scent instantly took me back to when Victoria was a little girl, sick with the flu. I'd brought her a bowl of orange slices, and she'd eaten them one by one, her small face pale against the pillows. It's like a phantom limb, a dull ache where a part of you used to be. You learn to live with the empty space. The ache doesn't break me. Not anymore. It just reminds me that the heart is a resilient muscle. It can be torn, and it can heal. The scar will always be there. But it is a part of you, not the whole of you. I've come to understand a few things. Sitting here in this chair, watching the seasons turn. Things you can only learn when your world has been shaken down to its very foundations. When you have to pick up the pieces of what you thought was true and decide which ones are worth keeping. My greatest mistake was not in loving my daughter, but in loving the idea of her I held in my heart. Instead of seeing the woman she had actually become, I saw the 6-year-old with the green crayon, the teenager crying over her first heartbreak, the radiant bride walking down the aisle. I held on to those snapshots so tightly. I failed to see the full picture that was developing right in front of me. I missed the shadows in her eyes, the sharp edge of entitlement in her voice, the growing distance between the daughter I remembered and the woman who sat at my table. My lesson, to all the parents who might be listening, is this: love your children with all your heart, but see them with both your eyes wide open. Love is a light to guide them, not a blindfold to hide their faults. And Victoria, she believed she was entitled to a life she hadn't earned. In her mind, the world owed her something: comfort, luxury, ease. She saw the finish line, the beautiful house, the fancy car, the designer clothes, but she refused to run the race. And in chasing a fantasy, she burned down her reality. She torched her marriage, her home, her family. The lesson for the next generation is simple. but it is a hard one to learn in a world that moves so fast. The life you build with your own two hands, no matter how humble, will always be worth more than the castle you try to steal. Because when you build it yourself, brick by painstaking brick, your soul has a place to live. A stolen castle is just a cold, empty fortress, and you will spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. But it wasn't just them. It was the world that shaped them. 2. I see it now. We live in a world of filters and curated perfection. A world that scrolls by on a screen. A world where debt is hidden behind vacation photos and desperation wears a designer coat. My daughter and son-in-law were not just greedy. They were drowning. Drowning in the pressure to appear successful, to keep up, to project an image of a life they couldn't afford and didn't know how to build. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is to look past the shimmering surface, to listen closer to the silence between the boasts, and to remember that true strength isn't about what you have. It's about who you are when you have nothing left but your own character. A car drives by. A young woman with a baby seat in the back waves at me. I don't know her, but I raise my glass of tea and wave back. It's what neighbors do on Holloway Street. I take a long, slow sip of my iced tea. It's sweet, but not too sweet. The cool liquid is a relief in the summer heat. The mint is a small, bright spark on my tongue. The sun is warm on my face. A gentle, healing warmth. The rocking chair moves in its slow, steady rhythm. Back and forth, like a deep, calm breath. In and out. Steady. Whole. My name is Brenda Holloway, and this is my house. It is quiet, it is safe, and it is mine. And that is where Brenda Holloway's story comes to a close. It leaves us with so many questions, doesn't it? What do you think of Brenda's final decision? Would you have done anything differently if you were in her shoes?